Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by show partner Zwift, here with Benji. As always, late night, Monday night UAE Team Emirates preview. Thank God I have Zwift to get on straight after this to cool down after Benji's alleged hot takes. Some have said they're icy cold. So, yeah, I don't know. We need a. I try to just make them delusional, Benji, and the people are not satisfied. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll say Pogacar could win the Tour this year. So stay tuned for that sort of analysis. Last year, Benji, 14 World Tour wins, Lombardia, Liège, Tour de France. What can you say, really?
UAE was the most successful team out there, in my opinion, when it comes to the most important races. And it's mostly done by one rider. And that's where the discussion came from, I think, at the end of last season, where people were discussing what was the best team of 2021. And it depends on the perspective of the person saying it. If you think that one rider can be seen as a team, then yes, they were the best team when it comes to performances. If you look at the depth of the squad, they were definitely not that last season. But do you think that this year might change that? Well, I guess we'll go into that in a second. But I think, yeah, Pogacar did it. The man did it to Lombardia. Pretty big race to win. LBL, pretty big race to win. And then the Tour de France, second tier 1 week race, of course. But yeah, if you win those all three, then you're arguably throwing your team to the top of the ranking in most important teams of the year, quite certainly.
Yeah, 14 World Tour wins. It's less than Bahrain, for example. And they didn't podium the Vuelta or the Giro, or I'm not sure where Micah or Co finished as well, whether they had top 10s. And the other three World Tour wins came from Gaviria Polonia, which no one saw. Micah, a nice solo, actually. Micah, I thought, was quite good last year in the Tour and the Vuelta. Yep. Vuelta stage 15, and Dombrowski Giro stage 4. Right place, right time, good level, and he's moved on to Astana. But yeah, it's not... Well, I mean, people criticize UAE, Benji, for, it's Pogacar, but like Jumbo, it's just Roglic and Wout van Aert too. So yeah, every team, it's a superstar sport. Every team, the best team should be relying on the superstar.
Yeah, exactly. It's better to pay 10 million towards Pogacar and win the Tour de France than pay 10 million around three riders that win races throughout the season but don't win the Tour de France.
Exactly. So who would you rather be, De Koning or UAE? I'd rather be UAE last year, even though De Koning, yes, it's a deeper team. I think Benji, and I don't agree, but I think they think their incoming transfers provide deeper wins, and I'm not exactly sure about that. Outgoing, Christian Camillo Munoz has gone to EPM Scott. He didn't pan out, and Ardila is a make or break year. I think Ryaboshenko didn't really progress too much either. The Belarusian's gone to Astana. Bystrom's gone with Christophe to Intermarché. That kind of makes sense, to be honest. Christophe is not looking like a consistent World Tour winner, but a consistent points getter. So for Intermarché, makes sense. Mercato retired. I think he's a DS somewhere now. De La Cruz, I don't think they'll miss him, to be honest, either. He's gone to Astana along with Dombrowski and Conti. And I think Bystrom, Benji, is actually the best of those guys to go. I don't really... De La Cruz, okay, De La Cruz can top 10 World Tour stage races and the Vuelta, but none of those guys are really moving the needle for me.
Yeah, same story here. I think Ryaboshenko was not really panning out the way they expected it to. Bystrom was a very consistent domestique. And even on races where you don't expect him to do well, was it Andalusia last year on that cobble hill where Hayter was going crazy that he was in the first 5-ish riders or somewhere on that steeper cobble climb? Like, this guy can surprise. And then was it Brugge de Panne 2 years ago, I think, where he was in the breakaway, or at least the elite group that was echeloned throughout, and then Van der Poel crashed towards the end, I think, that stage. Bystrom was also very important in that last part of the race. Can be important as a domestique when it comes to basically keeping your leader outside of trouble in echelons, and can be a domestique on the cobbles, and is relatively versatile for a domestique that is usually mostly planned out on the cobbles. So I do think that that's the one where I'm looking for the most when it comes to a loss in this list. But I don't think there's anything irreplaceable in this list personally. I think every rider that left can be replaced. And have they done that? I'm not sure. Yes, they did. Okay. First of all, shall we talk about the sprinting editions? They
Yeah.
have basically quite a few, right? Pascal Ackermann as a main sprinter. Then we've got Hodge as a sprinter with a bit of a cobble side to him. He won a few, I think he won GP Vermark or something, a cobble kind of race at some point last year. And Felix Grosch might be a lead out or a young sprinter. So what do you expect from these three riders for the squad?
I mean, if money's no object, it doesn't matter, but I wouldn't, for whatever they're paying these guys, I wouldn't have done it. Grosh is fine. He saw him sprinting / leading out next to Gaviria in Saudi Tour, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a mess, but listen, his first race, fine. Ackerman, I'd rather have Bennett than Ackerman. Say Bennett's 2
Yeah.
mil, say Ackerman's 1.3, pay Bennett 2 would be how I would look at it. I think the difference is more than 50% between the two in terms of World Tour, capability to get World Tour wins. So,
But you have a problem there, though, because if you take Sam Bennett as well, then you'll have trouble, because if you shout Bennett, then George is also going to react because he also signed for the team. So you got to think about the communication, man.
yeah, well, like Carapaz had to change his name, right? Because you can't have two Richies
Yeah.
at Ineos. Yeah, I don't think it moves the needle too much. Joel Suter they sign. Sorry, I don't think they're in a good position to get the best out of Ackerman, who was already struggling at Bora with the lead
Yeah.
out, etc. Their lead outs have been early doors here, but an absolute mess in all races so far this year. Suter looks good. He was on Bingo Al, Paul Salsa's WB, whatever WB is. Bastien now their star rider. Shout out Bass.
Wallonie-Bruxelles.
Bologna Bruxelles. Okay. He most notably was on the Switzerland team at Tour de Suisse last year, came fourth on the stage where Bissiger won, and he looked really good in Challenge Mallorca and really good in Etoile de Bessèges. He's 23, just looks good. Brunel is another sort of, I think he's a Tour de France potential domestique rouleur for Pogacar, they're thinking, Benji.
I don't know. I feel like Brunel had a bit of a weird transition. I think in 2019 and 2020, I was pretty hyped about him. I think 2020 was a year where he started really well off. Yeah, he got third in Bessèges. He won a stage there, the first one, got fourth in the final time trial. And then it kind of started going to the bad side, and it didn't really come out anymore after that. So, yeah, I feel like perhaps they think they can bring him back to the form that he was at the start of 2020 at some point and try and hone in on those skills to make sure it can be used. But in all honesty, the last 2 years, I don't see him as a rider that I would have expected to go to UAE, and I don't see how he can help this squad.
I think that's what they think they can get out of him, because they've lost Bistrom Benji. I think he's the Bistrom replacement. They've lost like Vergaard, Staker Langen, and Michael Bjerg. Not peak Luke Rowe, that's for sure. On the peak Luke Rowe in Von 2 stage is kind of weird last year. Well, that wasn't peak Luke Rowe. I'm saying their flat DOMs for Pogacar are not great. I don't think it's their major weakness of the team. Soler they've signed from Movistar. I don't like. Good for him, I guess. Like, I don't know. Is Soler on a long HC climb at the back end of a mountain stage going to close attacks if Pog's getting attacked or set a pace? Like, I guess Formolo did on stage 8 last year, but looks like an overpayment. Although I think he's a nice rider, nice stage hunter for sure. Paris win was a fluke. It's not like you shouldn't pay him on the basis that he's going to clean up World Tour stage races, GC again. But good stage hunter. And Almeida and Bennett, Benji. Bennett they signed as well as a domestique in the Mike, sort of similar to Micah. I think he can do that. I think he had a rough 21, could be better next year. What do you see from Soler and Bennett? Are they just Tour de France mountain train alongside Micah?
I think that is indeed the case. I think the issue there is that with Soler, we indeed have the Movistar history where he was inconsistent. He always thinks he's Contador in breakaways, which means that he attacks very heavily and then realizes he's not Contador and then falls back again and people beat him. Like, for example, Goldwyn that won a Vuelta stage as well, multiple times in the Tour de France in the past, that attack when Hirschi won that stage as well. So, yeah, he's got that aspect when going breakaways. The thing is, when it comes to domestique roles, he's always had this like backup leader thing as well at Movistar. So he's not always been domestique. He had that once where he was in that breakaway and got called back, of course. But perhaps it was the Movistar that was doing it. You think there's hope with the fact that he's leaving Movistar and the new environment could help him do better in a domestique role?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting paid. We're getting paid a lot of money, so. And I think the lines of communication will be a lot clearer. He will not be going to the Tour de France as maybe the leader. Maybe you'll get some chances. I don't think that's what's happening. That'll be, if he goes to the Tour, it'll be for one reason only. That'll be to ride for Pogacar. And maybe that actually is better for him. He's like, I have a role. I do this role. I perform at it. Certainly possible. In terms of I think Micah is still going to be better than him in the mountains, but Soler not bad at all of the shallow gradient stuff. Bennett, as I said, don't know. Almeida's the big one they've shelled out for, the best GC rider on the market.
Yeah.
They snapped him up, 23 years old. He just won Bologna, Skoda Tour of Luxembourg, 4th and 6th at the Giro in back-to-back years. Third GC UAE, good TT, good one-day racer, Emilia Torino, etc. Just a good all-round rider. But he's not going to the Tour, Benji. And that's why I thought they signed him. I thought they were signing him because he is a really good guy at setting tempo on climbs, and could be doing that for Pogacar, and even as a backup leader maybe. Were you surprised when you saw he was announced for the Giro?
Actually, no, because I believe McNulty can fill that role, the role of being secondary leader and the last domestique for Pogacar, being a rider that can set tempo on not very steep climbs. I don't believe McNulty is good enough to be the actual prime leader, but I believe he can certainly be that man that you are saying as the man that can pace for Pogacar. And I think the goal with Almeida was not necessarily strengthening the Tour de France squad, but strengthening the depth of the Giro and the Vuelta in this year, for example. Now, yes, the Giro doesn't have many time trial kilometers, and Almeida has a lot of bad luck in that sense because he was planning to go for it, then saw the parkour and then was like, okay, damn it. And then eventually still went for it. And then the Vuelta has time trial kilometers, fits him. And there the question is Pogacar also going to do the Vuelta after the Tour de France? That could be a great duo for the Vuelta as well. So I think their goal is trying to spread their eggs in multiple baskets to see if they can win more than the Tour de France. Because if you're not putting a step forward, you're basically staying on the same spot. I ruined that quote, okay. But you know what I mean? If Almeida, if they go to the Tour de France, they win the Tour de France again, it's the same as last year. So I think they want to expand on that. They want to get better in other races, in the other big races, and they want to dominate the entire sport instead of just the Tour de France. And the question there is that arrogance? Oh, Pogacar's going to win the Tour de France anyway. We don't need Almeida in the Tour de France to help him.
I was surprised. I thought he would do either Giro and then Tour de France as domestique, or he would. I thought Almeida would get. He's got plenty of chances. If you're a GC rider and you want 1 week GC chances, UAE is still great to go to because Pogacar goes to Tirreno. Well, there's Paris, there's Catalunya, there's so many other races, Swiss, Romandy,
Bologna.
So many races. Bologna, yeah, exactly. Can only go to so many, and they were not that competitive in the majority of them in GC. As Benji's saying, they want to get a deeper roster. But yeah, the Tour de France, peak, say Almeida Benji's peak is Port. Sort of TT guy, steady climber.
He crashes less.
He crashes a bit less, bonks a bit more. Maybe good 1 week guy. Ineos and Sky would take Port to the Tour de France to be that real right-hand man. Maybe Pog, I see where you're coming from, Benji. Has Tour de France 2021, where he's won by 5 minutes, lured them into a false sense of security? Because Roglic wasn't there, because he crashed out.
Yeah.
And maybe we get to week 3, Jumbo-Visma have Jonas, Kuss, and Roglic in a group. Micah's gone, and it's just Pogacar. And Roglic is close to Pogacar on GC, and Jonas is as well. And then he'd be like, damn, I wouldn't mind some Almeida right now to just pace this, set a pace on the front, like Kuss did for Jonas on Ardennes or one of the last mountain stages. So yeah, it's surprising. Good for Almeida though, Benji. Listen, maybe he wouldn't have signed there if he didn't get GT leadership somewhere in the year, because he had other offers.
Yeah, perhaps it was also a consequence of the Giro with Remco by his side, where afterwards there was a lot of talk about the leadership and so forth. During the race, there was a lot of, yeah, probably some awkward tension behind the scenes and also in front of the scenes, because it was pretty obvious that they had two riders that could be leader in that race. So perhaps he wanted to have leadership in a Grand Tour for certain, and therefore he wanted that Giro for certain, and he probably might not want to do the Giro Tour double. And as a consequence, the Vuelta is the next one in line.
You know which race they are both being sent to, the most important race of the year, UAE
Yeah.
Tour. They're both going to be there, so that's their Tour de France. So it'll be interesting to see them there. But yeah, I'm expecting. I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens with Almeida. I'm not confident. They've got a lot of riders here, Benji, coming from, I would say, better performance setups. I rate Jumbo, I rate Bora, and I certainly rate De Koning in respect of sprinters. Like the pattern is very clear with sprinters leaving Quickstep. We all know that. Coming to UA, I'm not convinced they are as good at preparing their riders, generally speaking, compared to those teams, just performance-wise. Tactics, slightly different, but
Yeah.
I think Pogacar's just complete uber talent. Anyway, before we get onto their Giro, Tour de France, cobbled squads, etc., of which Pogacar's actually doing a few of them, I mentioned our show partner, Zwift. We had an awesome time at the first LRCP Zwift group ride on Tuesday. We will be continuing those every Tuesday at 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. European time for the rest of February. So make sure you check those out if you're on Zwift, or maybe if you want to get on Zwift, you can check out at Zwift.com in the link below for your 7-day free trial to see what it's all about. There's 9 unique worlds, including fantasy locations like Watopia and real life locations like UCI World Championships courses. So thanks to Zwift for supporting the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. Cobble Squad, Benji, bit of a mixed bag here, including Pogacar apparently doing Dwars and then RVV at the back end of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh? I feel like when it comes to Pogacar, he's done the Tour de France. He hasn't done 2 Grand Tours in a season yet. That is yet to be seen and perhaps might happen this year. He announced that he might do that. And he also did that last year, announcing it, but not riding them eventually. So the question is, will he do that? But when it comes to other races, he also did the Hill Classics. And I think this year is where he wants to expand into the cobble races and be more versatile into those races as well. And to be honest, I kind of see it. I went into his history. I found a picture of like basically kiddo Pogacar, little Pogi, little Tamao, and I found that he actually had a pretty good result in the was it Paris-Roubaix Espoir, and it's actually a race that is not like a shady cobble race. It's actually with proper cobble sections and so forth. And therefore, I do truly believe that Pogacar can do well in cobble stages. We might have a hot take about it towards the end.
He's the best cobbled rider in all cobbled races.
Yeah, that's
Just
kind of true.
facts.
And that's the question I want to ask. Like, his team is not that great surrounding him. Trentin, Lengen, Rui Oliveira. Oliveira being the guy that I think got top 35 somewhere in E3. But then Ackerman is also doing all the cobble race. And I'm like, okay, I didn't expect that.
Really? I mean, what's he done before? Has he? I'm probably. It depends, like which Ackerman is turning up, because Ackerman's third at Oxyclean, classic Brugge de Panna, but like Dwars and RVV are way too hard for him. I'm trying to look. Has he been?
And Roubaix.
Is he doing Roubaix? Damn.
Yeah.
Has he done? He's DNF'd Wevelgem last time. Yeah, not the strongest sprinter. He's not on it solo. I think Trent. The problem is the reason I say Pogacar is because Pogacar looks faster than Trentin in a sprint right now. Like, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just like Trentin's sprint has looked gone lately.
It's garbage.
Like, yeah, it's not been great. Maybe he turns it around. Like, I like Trentin. I think he seems to be he's active with Gilbert and the Riders Union, etc. I think he's a great guy. But yeah, his sprint looks a little bit gone, and maybe he should focus on his climbing or whatever. I don't know. I'm not here to give advice to Matteo Trentin. He's smart enough. But yeah, it's their weakest part of their squad. Trentin, Ackerman, as you said, Benji will do the early ones, and then Pogacar comes in for the later couple classics. Maybe Brunel. I mean, Mikkel Bjerg, isn't that what he like? You can't just be a flat dominant. He wasn't just signed, Benji, to be a flat domestique. Like, he was signed as a really big, talented guy. So what's happening with his classics?
I was wondering, like, wouldn't he benefit from doing a few of these cobble races as well, in kind of a look at the Tour de France cobble stage, because they're gonna want to try and keep some people with Pogacar in that race as well on those cobble races. It won't be George Bennett most likely, so why not have a Bjerg ride those cobble races, get used to it as well, to make sure that in the Tour de France he can play a role in positioning Pogacar at the start of each cobble section. So that's where I saw the value in that, and I don't know. I don't think he was signed up for them, but I could be wrong in that.
I think Trenton's not bad in that role. But yeah, probably not the strongest part of their
He's not riding
squad.
it,
Is he not doing it?
according to
Wow,
the current planning. Trenton is not going to the
okay,
Tour de France.
damn. I would have thought they'd have him in there. Hill Classics is completely opposite. Stack team. Pogacar, he or she who had hip surgery or something, Benji?
Yeah, I don't know anything more than that. I just know that he had a hip surgery apparently.
Okay. So hopefully he's back in time. Micah, McNulty he won that Mallorcan race. Surely McNulty is an option now in those hilly
Yeah,
classics. Trenton for Amstel, Almeida as well. Surely Almeida should be doing some of these classics early in the season, one would think. It's a much better it's a good squad. Ulysses is not as good as those guys. But yeah, Pogacar, LBL, Lombardia, and Flesh. Do you think who's better, Peak Hirschi Benji or Pogacar for Flesh?
big Hirschi, because he won Flash, right? Or was
Yeah,
that the year where Alaphilippe did not ride it? I don't
correct.
remember it
Yeah,
for certain.
Alaphilippe didn't turn up.
But I still believe that Hirschi at peak is better at Murderweed than Pogacar is. When it comes to McNulty, I believe he should ride it indeed, because he's still got quite some time before the Tour de France as well. When it comes to Almeida, probably the reason that he's not doing it is because he
Oh
wants to
yeah,
do the
Giro.
Giro and wants to have the perfect run in for that, I'm guessing. So probably that's the reason. But yeah, Pogacar is the man, I guess. Even for Amstel, Trentin is signed up, but I'd be aiming to go for Pogacar because, like you said, I trust the sprint more at the moment, and therefore he's the all-out leader there. And I think that's a trend that sets in every race that Pogacar starts for UAE. Literally in every race he starts, he is one of the leaders, quite certainly, and if not, the top leader in each race. So that's wonderful to see for him. But it's kind of fearful for the riders like Hirschi, who signed up for this team expecting to have a role in Hill Classics and had a bit of an off year. And if Hirschi returns to top again, I think he will be more easily put into a domestique role than Pogacar will.
Yeah, if that happens, he's had a lot of issues since he turned up at UAE. But yeah, maybe Pogacar skips LBL and goes Lombardia. That could happen probably this year. Their Giro squad will be Almeida, Formolo, Costa, Covey, Richese, who's come like out of retirement. I think Ulysses and they're missing a sprinter. I think Milano might go Benji. I think they will take like a sprinty guy. I don't know, and maybe Palance or another mountain domestique. Does Formolo know that Almeida's the leader?
I think he does. There was this like thingy for a bit where some article came out that was referring to Formula as saying that he also wants freedom or leadership in some way or wants to go free for stages, but I don't think that was actually the case. I think that was just a case of a mistranslation. So hopefully that was indeed a mistranslation, because Formula should not be having leadership in this race. Perhaps on one of those hill stages he can go for that, but I wouldn't. I would leave Formula chained to Almeida the entire race, and I would let Covey go on those hill stages, like a stage 8 and a 10. On the 10th stage of the Giro 2022, we will see a victory from Covey, as Mr. Lanterne Rouge said himself in our Giro preview. I checked an hour ago to be sure.
Really?
But yeah, so I'm looking forward to those stages, and I want to see him freed up, because Covey's definitely going to win a Giro stage this year. I can feel it. And the question there is like, You've got riders like Ulysses and so forth. Those are riders that could also go in breakaways, also in stages. Costa, I think he's going to be chained.
He should be. He's not looking like his Saudi Tour performance, where he's done better in the previous years, was not good, not at his top level. I think Almeida can big contender for stage one. The question is, does Ulysses or Almeida or Costa? They've like
Yeah,
literally any of the guys that we just read out would think they'd be thinking when they put their head on their pillow at night. Yeah, I can
yeah,
win that stage, except maybe Richele. But Almeida can win it. We saw in Tirreno he was
yeah.
strong, if not tactically not great, on that sort of uphill drag, and I think they should. I think they're going to light it up. I think UAE are going to light that up and try and win the stage, like they did with, was Ulysses on their team when he won Agrigento? I think he was in Giro 2020, where they lit it up. They should win some stages there.
Yeah, I agree. I also wanted to add when it comes to the sprinting, um, we've got Richese in this race for certain. At the start of this season, Richese did not have a contract, but we decided to extend it as Richese was unable to find a contract, even though he has that history of being a good lead out. Last year it didn't really come out, let's be honest about it. But he's now going to the Giro and planned for the Giro. So if you have a lead out, you got to send a sprinter. You mentioned Milano. Gaviria's saying that he won't ride a Grand Tour. So, or he's not sure that he will ride a Grand Tour. I've got a feeling that that's going to change. I think that Gaviria will end up riding the Giro anyway.
I mean, Ackerman's the one that, if he wants to get a Giro stage, this is the one to go for. Like, all right, his schedule looks like he's going to wait till the Vuelta, but Gaviria doesn't look great, and he's going to be. I'm surprised he's not going to the Giro, frankly. Anyway, Almeida would be one of the big favourites for the Giro to beat Carapaz. Tour de France, the big one. Pogacar, Bennett, Bjerg, Hirschi, Micah, McNulty, Soler are the indicative team list, although, of course, Pogacar is an absolute lock. The thing that's light, well, A, there's no Jan Palance there. Interesting. B, it's very light on flat control, cobbled experience. And the first 6 stages of this Tour de France start in Denmark and northeast France, and has a cobbled stage on stage 5. And I just don't think Bjerg is. I don't think he's enough. And I think that is where Ineos and Jumbo Visma can put pressure on Pogacar. The one stage that UAE looked the least bit vulnerable last year was stage 7, where they couldn't control the Rouleau breakaway with Wout van Aert. It ended up not mattering whatsoever. That was the one stage where there was a half-hour moment where UAE's domestiques kind of looked like they were panicking when they just couldn't close the gap. And do you think it's fine, Benji, and they don't need another man, or is Vergaard Steker Langen going to go as well?
I'd indeed feel more safe if we have another one of those flat people in this race, quite certainly, to support the team. Yes, Bjerg can play that role. Yes, Langen could fill up that role. Is that going to be enough? It was enough to relatively keep control in the 2021 Tour de France. So I guess adding Langen could help. I think McNulty can also do that work a bit as well. But would you want to do that? Because he's a bit your backup leader, basically, in this squad, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be putting him at the front in a stage like that. So, like you say, it's light on that aspect, and I think that's where they're vulnerable. I wouldn't expect that to happen on the cobble stage, personally, because I actually just expect a lot from Pogacar himself on the cobble stage. So, unless it opens up before the cobbles, I believe he can position himself well and follow people on the cobble. So, I have confidence there. Now, what I see in this squad is that Micah was a solid domestique in the Tour de France. He had that stage one in the Vuelta. McNulty, well, he crashed very early on in the Tour de France, and to be fair, we didn't get to see peak McNulty in the Tour de France. Do you think that he might be more eager as a backup leader than the Tour de France 2021? Just in
He's not.
case?
No. Absolute
All out
domestique.
Pogacar.
100% domestique. Yeah.
Yeah. He deserves it. Pogacar to be...
Yeah. McNulty's just not the
leader.
Jonas level. So I just don't see it as plausible that he can do that. He's good, but yeah, I think he is a good all-round rider. Still developing. 1 week stage race is fine with heavy TTKs, but this tour, no. Granon stage, big trouble for him based on the last year or so. I do think Brunel or Trentin someone like that should be in the Tour de France team as well. And we didn't read out 8 names, so I'm sure they will add in some flat domestiques. But yep, Pogacar will be the Tour favourite. Still a good, pretty good squad, and but no Formula Benji actually, even though he was
Yep.
quite good last year. Yeah. I guess Soler can fill that role. Vuelta, Pogacar is apparently going to go. Do you think if he wins Tour, he'll go?
I think he it's difficult, because last year he said that he was going to go to Vuelta as well until he won the Tour de France and then decided to go for Lombardia. I think this year he will go to the Vuelta because Lombardia is not a goal needs to be chased anymore because he won it already. So I believe that Pogacar will ride the Vuelta and the Tour de France for the first time in his career, and I might have a hot take about that too towards the end of this podcast. So I'm looking forward to diving into those. But when it comes to that Vuelta team, Almeida's there, so potentially we see Almeida Poggi for the first time since the UAE Tour, unless they come together somewhere in between, but I don't think so schedule-wise. Next to that, Ackermann as sprinting. There's quite a few flat sprints in the Vuelta this year, so there's an opportunity there to try something. We've seen the likes of Gerben Thijssen getting second in sprint stage and so forth in the Vuelta. I think it was behind Ackermann when Bennett got disqualified or something. Vaguely remember some situation like that. But I hope that we see Ackermann back in a decent form because I just hate seeing it. Like Demar, Viviani, Ackermann, they all had a bit of an off year or off years. So I like seeing those riders back into a form where they can compete for sprints because I like seeing more and more sprint competition. I like analyzing sprints, and if we have one rider being better than the rest and then a few riders behind it, I don't like that. So I'd like to be seeing more top sprinters. And the question there is, who's his lead out? Because right now there's no one signed up that
Nobody.
I see as a lead out.
Yeah,
Marc Soler.
Yeah, I don't know. Pogacar probably be the best. Seriously, Pogacar should be the best lead out for him based on that list. It's all mountain guys.
Felix Grosch, is he old enough
Grosch will
to go to a Grand Tour?
Benji, mate, if they can drive, they go into two. They can go to two, maybe 3 Grand Tours a year. If they can,
Ayuso is
drive
not going to any Grand Tour.
Well, that's a mistake. I mean, I think there's a consistent under expectation of what 22 to 24-year-old riders can do, and people might not be good at 30 or as good. So anyway, that's the separate discussion.
We don't see Joel Sutter signed up for any Grand Tour, and I feel like he could actually play that role in the Tour de France of being that rider pacing.
True. That's a good point. So I think UAE are definitely a wait and see who does well in these 1 week World Tour races that we have coming up shortly with Paris-Nice, Catalonia, etc. in March. Anyway, over under time, Benji, they've usually been about 10, 11, and last year 14 World Tour wins. UAE, I'm setting with the addition of Almeida and Soler and Ackermann and Bennett, I have to bump it up a little bit more, despite they haven't really lost anyone except Dombrowski. I'm going 16 and a half, and I'm taking the under.
I'm taking the over.
Okay. 16 and a half over under. Alrighty. And
do you
think Pogacar? Do you think Pogacar's taking like 10 or 11 again?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Because he's not only going to the Tour de France in my mind, also to the Vuelta, so that adds 3 more potential stage wins in that race. So combine that with the Tour de France also getting 2 to 3 stage wins. Combine that to UAE Tour getting the Jebel Hafid finish. That's 7 stage wins. And then we're looking at, is he going to Slovenia again this year? I am guessing that he... Oh, yeah, you're right. That's not World Tour, but it should be in our hearts. He's going to... what race? Tirreno. He's going to win the mountaintop finish. Well, no, it's a descent finish. The Carpegna stage. So that's 8. And then we are looking at my hot take of the day. Pogacar wins the Tour of Flanders. So we've got 9, right? Am I counting correctly? And then he's going to win... I don't know, he's going to find something throughout the season to win extra. Then it's probably going to be hard for Pogacar, actually.
True. And then Almeida, Polonia, Soler will win 1. McNulty, I think, will win 1 or 2. Yeah, damn.
Giro stage. Ooh.
Yeah, Giro. Ulisi obviously has to take a Giro stage. 16.5. I'm still taking the under. Joel Suter probably be the one that tips it over. Hot takes, Benji. You said Pogacar will win the Tour of Flanders. I think they don't podium a Grand Tour.
Jesus fuck! What the fuck? Are you insane?
I don't think they do. I think, I just don't see it. That's my gut take. I don't think they podium. I don't think UAE podium a Grand Tour. The squad's a little bit light in some parts. I think the signings are overpaid and overrated. And
I've got a second hot take. I think they win every single Grand Tour of the season. Almeida, Giro, Pogacar, Tour and Vuelta.
Well, they'll be the favourite for two of them, and Almeida's second favourite this Giro. So, my
Mate,
take
it's hot.
is not just
what team has won all three?
Not hot. Did Sky ever do it? Does Peak Sky ever do
no.
it? Probably. They won Tour, Vuelta, Giro in a row, 17, 18, but not in the same year. Okay.
Yeah.
Regardless, even if we are a bit skeptical, or I'm a bit skeptical at UAE's strength and depth, they will be the favourites for the Tour de France and pretty much any race that stage race Pogacar turns up to on the general classification. So they'll be having a pretty good year if all goes to plan for them. But thanks for listening, as always, to the UAE team previews for 2022. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Zwift, as always, for supporting the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Ciao.